All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to another episode of the Remarkable Coach podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael Pacheco, and today with me, I have Ty Hammond. Ty's an executive team and leadership coach, the founder of One Mountain Leadership, and creator of the True Leadership Approach. He works with people who are committed to their growth as both a leader and as a human being to learn how to consistently transform what holds them back into the confidence, capacity, and presence of true leadership. Ty Hammond, welcome to the Remarkable Coach.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you making time for us here. As always, I like to open up this podcast by simply inviting our guests to tell us a little bit more about yourself in your own words and what got you into the coaching thing.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I appreciate that opportunity. I was speaking about this on the Coffee with Coaches podcast a little bit as well, and just talking about this journey into becoming a coach is so different for most folks. And I think I could go at it from a couple of different places. There's the personal aspect of the journey for sure, and then there is also a professional aspect. And from the personal space, I would say that I experienced as a very young child some pretty significant challenges, right? My mother died when I was 4 years old. And that led me really into a life, I would say the first 20 years of my life, where I was really deeply plagued by self-judgment, by shame, by a story of not being safe and not being enough that I would say really influenced every single aspect of my life in really, really hard ways. I was just putting it the other way. I was like, I really committed myself to my victim story and to my suffering, I would say the first 20 years of my life. And then it just essentially, as it does happen for a lot of people, that extent of hardship really just had me seeking what else was possible. And so for the latter 20 years, I'm just turning 40 here in a little bit, I really committed myself to my freedom and to my healing. And that really began a deep introspective journey, one in which I very willingly and intentionally sought out seeking help, and healing. And in the process, not only did I experience, immense healing along the way, have been very, very fortunate to come across amazing teachers and mentors. I also just fell in love with human potential and the possibility of human growth and development. So I became an avid student, I would say, a really committed student of just how people grow, how consciousness develops. I'm just like super interested in that, for my own journey, but also just in general. And so that's sort of on the personal side, really in a jiff. And that commitment to my own freedom and to my own growth it's really paramount in my life to this day. I've experienced so much healing, right? And experienced a life of freedom and confidence and capacity in a way that I never could have even dreamed was possible when I was younger. And right, it's an ongoing journey forever and ever. So it still, remains my number one. And along the way, this interest in relationships and how we communicate with each other and how we grow together and how we work together, really just naturally led me into this place of leadership development. And so, I've been actually working with groups in terms of like organizational development and team building and group dynamics for longer than I have been working with individuals. And there was a reason that I sort of waited to work with individuals. But I've always been interested in the dynamics of how human beings, of course, learn and grow, right? But how do we learn and grow together? And then when you bring that together, and boy, I've had experiences working with companies over the years where a team experience can be, boy, it is the whole spectrum, right? It can be the most amazing experience that people have ever had.
Mm-hmm.
working together towards something and achieving something incredible. And it can also be one of the hardest experiences that people have had, depending on what those dynamics are. Um, and there's lots of other stories in there that I could say and I could tell, but I would say those are the primary things that sort of coalesced into this deep passion for personal growth, development, how consciousness and growth works, and how people can work together and grow together in ways that, of course, help us to uh, achieve a common aim, a common purpose, all of the things that happen when you're working in organizations towards a common goal.
That's great. That's great, Ty. I want to thank you first of all for, kind of opening up in public like that and being very vulnerable about your past and kind of how you came around to this. As you were going through this journey of healing personally, what did that look like for you? Did you hire a coach, or did you have other kind of methods to go through that kind of stuff that you committed to? What did that look like?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really important question. I think, at the beginning, and this is so, what do I want to say? It's so deeply baked in to, I think, some of what I'm still finding myself working through and working with.
I don't think it stops.
No, ever. Um, but when I first sort of, like, let's say I was really 19 years old when I was like, I have to do something different. This particular story, this, way that I'm experiencing the world, I have to be open to something else. And when that light switch turned on, it really, like, I just threw myself, was called into, however you want to call it,
Yep.
looking for another way forward. I really didn't know what to do. And I just did everything that I could on my own. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced what I thought was really a lot. I did a lot of healing, but it was all really very much self-led.
Mm-hmm.
And as I look, and first of all, I don't regret any of it, right? I totally needed that experience, but that was also born from some of the old story and the suffering that told me that I was alone. So I was alone in my suffering, and then I became alone in my journey out of healing, right? I was still alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then it actually ended up running me into some very significant challenges later on. Let's say, like, 6-7 years down the line, I'm like mid-20s, and I have experienced what I feel are like major leaps and bounds in terms of transforming, right? And experiencing, not as a victim, I would say, but now as the hero
Mm-hmm.
of my own story, which is its own issue or challenge, because whether you're the victim or the hero, you're still on that drama wheel, if you know that.
Yep.
Sort of. So there's still issues inherent with that, right? So I changed from the victim to the hero of my story because I had saved myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just a whole new story that I had bought into, right? And that had very significant effects on my life, essentially all which came crashing down. And the universe has this tendency, I would just say with me, to just, I'm consistently shown or given opportunities to see what's actually true by bumping up against what's actually happening in reality. So I, when I was 29, a woman that I had met, who I am amazingly best friends with now, but it was not a committed relationship in a way that we were sort of looking to have a baby. She ended up getting pregnant, and I was, confronted with, I think, what happens, at least for, are you a father? Are you a parent?
I am a father as of 4 months ago.
So. Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, congratulations. That's huge. I don't know what it was for you, but for me, that process of stepping into fatherhood just confronted me with so much, right? And it became not about me in this way that just was so real and so important that all essentially the lies, the stories that I had been telling myself, from this journey of doing things on my own, began to really shake up and shake apart. And it was in that process, right, of that sort of shaking up and shaking free that fortunately I have um, I have a relationship with a teacher in a particular tradition that has been incredibly important in terms of access to wisdom that has truly, truly helped, and being part of a community in which people are, all collectively engaged in a conversation together on
Mhm.
how to learn and grow, and like recognizing that we're all doing our own stuff, right? So I would say that really was the doorway open where I was like, oh, I need help.
Mhm.
And that's really when everything shifted, right? So I would say I thought that I made all of this progress. It was totally necessary. I had to do it.
Yeah.
And then once that story of, I was like alone in my suffering, and then I was alone in my, being a hero, taking me out of my suffering. And then once both of those fell, and I was just sort of at a place where I needed some help, that's where everything really started shifting. And I'd say for the past, 10 years, that's really been a deep commitment where I've been receiving a lot of help,
That's awesome.
you know, and
Yeah.
consistently do, that I have my teachers and my mentors that I meet with regularly. So yeah, absolutely.
You have your own coach, a coach that coaches you?
So I have several different. So I have a teacher, which I would say is a coach in some ways,
Mhm.
though it's really particularly focused on the inner work, which is some of what I focus on in my own work.
Yeah.
And then I have a mentor that is more sort of in the professional realm. He's actually been a colleague of mine. We've done a lot of work together, and I have regular calls with him. And I'm at a point right now where I'm building a business, and so there's all of the components of actually learning how to build a business,
Mhm.
right? Which is brand new to me, and I think you probably understand. You can be you could be the best at your craft and what you're doing, but if you don't know how to sort of bring that message to the world, and it's all of the sort of foundations of actually building a business, which are the places that I'm receiving, I would say, coaching help around at
Yeah.
this point. Mhm.
Nice. That's great. That's awesome, man. I'm a little jealous that you figured it out, or you started to figure it out at 19. It took me 35 years to figure out that I needed to make some changes and kind of turn stuff around a little bit. I'll share a quick story about my past. So I grew up. My father abandoned me when he was 6 years old. I was told by my family that he told my mother to either have an abortion or he was going to take off. He was going to leave. He ended up leaving, and my mother was emotionally abusive at times, and there was all sorts of stuff kind of going on there. And 35 years is how long it took me to really kind of get into. Um, I mean, I'm going to call it, for lack of a better phrase, I'm going to call it personal development, right? And start kind of reading books and teaching myself some stuff, and then looking for mentors, and then eventually looking for coaches, and so on and so forth. So that's, I mean, it's been incredibly impactful in my life, and it sounds like it's been as equally impactful in yours, which is
I'm
why we're here.
Yeah, well, I so thank you for sharing that story. I guess I'm always curious about that inflection point because I have my own in my mind.
Uh-huh.
Like, what is that? Could you speak to that? I'm so curious from like, what was that point at 35?
For me, it was a kidney failure.
Hmm.
I was born with a kidney disease. Both my kidneys were not good. It's progressive, basically kidney defect. And at 35 years old, it was kidney failure. And I was like, I just it forced me to take things a little more seriously, And then 4 months ago, right, my daughter's born, and I'm leveling up again and looking at myself in the mirror, like, okay, I thought shit got real a few years back. Now it's really real.
I'm with you, my friend, and I support you in that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's been all the miracles that I think parents say it is, though. It's been amazing. Yeah.
Oh. What's her name?
Her name is Opal.
Opal.
Yeah.
Fantastic, man. It's amazing. My son now is 9, and my fiance and I are getting married in March, and she has a child who's 8. So we got two little ones in the household ourselves.
That's awesome, man. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Circling back to you, you mentioned you had an interest in how consciousness develops.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit more about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a couple different routes I think that I could go at this from here, because ultimately this question is sort of gets to the essence of the work that I do. I think it's a lot to sort of claim, let's say, that you're working at the level of consciousness, which is the source of experience, right?
Mhm.
And in some ways, that's how I make a distinction between my work and other work that's out there, which is also helpful, but not actually working at the level of immediate direct experience. So I'll talk about this in two ways, because I feel like one of the ways that I've been talking about the work that I do is built from my own direct experience of having a teacher that is connected to an ancient wisdom lineage, and the challenges that I had to actually receiving those teachings because of the modern Western mind that I had.
Mhm.
So I have dedicated myself in study experientially and through study, both from understanding from my own experience what are the ways that me and the way that I make sense of the world from this Western super hyper cognitive way of understanding the world has actually gotten in the way of me actually listening, for example, to what my teacher, my mentor, has been saying for, she was saying for 12 years before I
Mhm.
actually started listening. And it's all about really coming in and experiencing what is happening in the body
Mhm.
in the present moment prior to our interpretation of what's happening in the mind. Right. So, and as I have experienced and deepened in that work, which is a lot of what I offer through the True Leadership Foundation's mastermind,
Mhm.
is really a learning how to be with experience in a way that you actually have the experience that you're having.
Mhm.
And so, because you can't actually not have the experience that you're having. The only thing that we can do is disconnect from it.
Mhm.
And when you disconnect from a dissociation, it can be a totally out of body dissociation, or it can be even a tiny one. But to whatever extent we reject what's happening, we're disconnecting from the experience that we're having.
Mhm.
And the only way that I have found, at least from my experience, to truly grow naturally without any effort, right, is just to allow ourselves fully to have the experience that we're having, right?
Mhm.
So that is ultimately, you could say, presence, right? It's just being with what is right here without trying to find some, you know, following one of the minds or the egoic constructs, many sort of little ways that it has to take us away from the present moment because it doesn't want to experience it.
Yeah.
So that's on one side. On the other side, I would say that I really have been studying adult developmental theory. So there's, theorists like Ken Wilber, and out of Harvard right now, I'm totally forgetting, I'm looking up on my bookshelf, Robert Keegan. Yeah.
Mhm.
These adult developmental theorists, which are talking about, and I think this is really important as well, understand for coaches, no matter what kind of work that we're doing, just essentially understanding that development, I mean, we know this sort of inherently,
Mhm.
right? But development doesn't stop in childhood, right? You don't get to 18 and then, which actually was the norm. There was sort of like what was believed culturally and intellectually for a long time is that, adult development, so by the time you were 18, you're pretty much baked, right? And now, of course, with brain science and adult development theory, we know that there's these latter stages of adult development, right? And so studying that and really getting a sense, especially from the modern perspective,
Mhm.
what are these different ways that we're making sense of reality? Where are we in our learning journey? And I found that has been absolutely critical in being a coach, right? In understanding my own place and my own development, certainly with engaging with groups and with teams,
Mhm.
um, to find is sort of like starting where you are, right? That's something, depending on, the way that you're making understanding here is going to, be more effective than if you're understanding or making sense of things in this way. So I'd say that there's that, those two realms, a sort of more cognitive approach based on the intellectual sort of study of adult human development, and then there's the immediate direct experience based on what I've learned through the practices and methodology of the teacher that I've been working with for close to 15 years now.
Cool. So is this adult development theory? That's a phrase that I'm not familiar with, but is that similar to like we're talking about like brain plasticity here? Neuroplasticity?
I think that those things are related in a way, because anytime that you talk about growing, you're going to be talking about neuroplasticity in a
Yeah.
way. But adult development theory is a really, I think, if not, deeply, what I think is deeply important, it's at least very, very interesting for anybody who is interested
Yeah.
in how people grow. Essentially, at a very base level, I'll just say it's like, that your daughter, right, will be able to do things and will have a capacity to do things, right, at 4 years old, that she just does not have the capacity to do right now
Sure.
as a 4-month old, right?
Yeah.
And that's not making a statement about her being better or worse,
Right.
right? It's not saying, for example, that the oak, the 100-year-old oak tree is better than the sapling, but it is sort of just acknowledging that there are different stages of growth
Hmm.
that happen. And actually, the same thing happens in adult development. The thing about childhood development is that unless something goes horribly wrong,
Hmm.
right, a vast majority of people are going to make it to the first stage, right, of adult development. The thing about adult development, which I think makes coaching in organizations and with adults so interesting, is that anybody could be at multiple different places,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and so you're not guaranteed to move through the stages. It's open and available to everybody, right? It's a guarantee for no one. And that actually that movement through these, first of all, just knowing about these stages is not what does it, right? It takes, and you can move through these stages, right, based on, and it's so weird to talk about the thing like in stage, but you can grow without knowing about these, right?
Sure.
But to have that sort of map in general as a way for bringing deeper perspective about, I can see that if they're seeing the world this way, that's how they would respond to that. I'm seeing the world this way because I'm making sense of the world in this way. In terms of team and, human development, that has been an invaluable map, I would say, to
Yeah.
help
It's like
understand.
it's essentially a framework for conversation, understanding, and analyzing behaviors, right? Something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really about understanding how someone makes sense
Uh-huh.
of reality, so that um yeah, so the more that I can sense into that intuitively, right, the better I am going to be um able to meet someone where they're at, to
Yeah.
have a conversation that is really going to be meaningful,
Yeah.
right? And help, provide support in ways that are going to be the most helpful,
Yeah.
and equally for me too, right? It's an opportunity for self-awareness, right? If I
Sure.
sort of know where I'm at in this particular framework, then I'll be able to consistently ask myself these own questions, and receive, guidance from the people that help and support me.
Nice. Nice. So I think this is great. I think we've kind of established a foundation upon which we can now kind of we can talk a little bit about your true leadership approach, right? You've talked a little bit about your kind of your background and your interests. How did that kind of culminate in this approach that you've created, the true leadership approach, and what is the true leadership approach?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that is, well, how did it all culminate together? I think that's an interesting question. As with some things, I'd say, first of all, it is founded in my own personal direct experience based on what I have learned. That is a very fundamental aspect, that I'm not offering up something that is just sort of like a conceptual understanding or something that I learned from somebody else, right? What I'm offering, that I've, as many, I would say most people do, are offering up what they've learned themselves. The second piece of it is coming, as I said, this work at its essence, I think, is priming the modern mind to receive ancient wisdom teachings. That's coming from my own challenges that I had, my own blockages of just hearing what my teacher was 5 years before I actually was able to hear it. So ultimately, what I saw through my own experience with her, was that a lot of what I was hearing from her, I was taking, and I think, and my guess is that this is happening often, right? That we all have personality, we all have egoic construct, let's say, that we build up out of our experiences. We all have, and there's nothing wrong with having a personality.
I hope not.
Right. But the personality is essentially the collection of all of these different ways that make up our, defenses and our reactivity, and the things that, make life hard, and ultimately the thing that brings people to coaching, right? And ultimately the things that, like, people want to work and grow on. So part of what I began to see in myself is that if that you can give someone really, someone can, let's say, read a book, or take a training, or even receive coaching, right? Mm-hmm. And if they're taking that in through the filter of their personality and applying it, mm-hmm. is most likely going to happen there is what I would say less of personal development as it is personality development. Mm-hmm. So one way that I'll offer this little sort of metaphor I've been utilizing, which is like, and I said it myself, right? Taking, I saw myself as the victim in my story, and I became the hero of my own story, right? And I think there's a way to sidestep the challenge of that, because it's sort of similar to, let's say you're in a prison yard, right? And you're the weak person in the prison yard. Uh-huh. And then you create, you become the tough guy in the prison yard. It's better to be the tough guy and not be the one that's getting beat up all the time, but you're still in right? You're still not free. It's better, right? Yep. So it will help you, but it won't free you. Mm-hmm. And the true leadership approach isn't, and I want to just, I think that so many, in whatever way that we can find help, is incredibly, incredibly important. The true leadership approach is actually about helping to identify, and at the basis of it, it's very, very simple. Mm-hmm. It's just learning to discern between what is actually awareness, like what we actually are, is loving awareness, not through the construct of our personality, mm-hmm. but what we actually are, mm-hmm. versus doing the work of personal development through the personality. And the difference between that is massive. Mm-hmm. Because if we do personal work, personal growth through, at least from my experience, I've done it myself, I can't speak for everybody, but through the personality itself, it's possible to just build up another aspect of our personality, right? Mm-hmm. I would say like a louder voice in a room of an already crowded room of voices. And then the true leadership approach ultimately is about learning how to attune to the different voices in the room, mm-hmm. so that they stop making so much noise. It actually becomes quieter in there. So okay. It's less about creating a stronger, louder voice in an already crowded room. And it's more about learning how to attend to the myriad voices of the
Uh-huh.
personality, which are all in there, all vying for their way forward, for their strategies to avoid, overcome, or solve your problems, right? And actually learn to attune to those in a way which you don't follow the trap that they're leading into,
Mm-hmm.
right? Leading one into, which is ultimately disconnecting you from the present moment,
Mm-hmm.
not fully having an experience, and therefore, robbing you of an opportunity to truly grow from it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I'm consistently looking for ways to, you know, talk about this, and
Yeah.
generally speaking, I'll talk about this in terms of something that's actually like happening with the person. So this is one of the first times I'd say I'm talking about it in more of a like a conceptual sort of framework. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
even to hear how that landed for you.
No, that's good. I think it tracks. I might, if I can try to put it into my own words and see if it tracks for
Please,
you, to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly.
please, yeah.
It sounds to me like, and I'm gonna put this in, I'm gonna use my own vernacular, not to say that yours
Great.
is wrong or worse or anything, just like I said,
Great.
to make sure that I understand it. It sounds to me like you're basically it sounds like you're doing is working with people to help them understand the difference between, kind of who they truly are and the ego that protects them. And I think when you're talking about a bunch of different voices, it sounds to me as though you're talking about the ego, right? The ego is protecting you from stuff. The ego's helping you. The ego is what helps you survive through trauma, right? And all this stuff, and it builds the walls, and it builds the thick skins, and it builds the stories. Like all of that is ego, and being able to understand the difference between, well, just being able to recognize, I think recognize might be the right word, being able to recognize when the ego is interpreting something in a very specific way. I think that is that
You, I think, yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I think that's really it. And I just saw, I call it the distinction between who we are and what we are, right?
right.
Who we are, the construct of the personality, the identities that we build up, right?
Yeah.
Versus what we are is that blank, it's the light behind, it's the light behind the, whatever, it's the light that's shining behind whatever film, the movie is showing. It could be a scary movie or a rom-com, it doesn't matter, but the filter almost is, that's what we become identified, but it's that light that's shining behind that. It's always the same.
Hmm.
And that is my experience of being free from the entanglements of just sort of getting locked in this, well, here's this new better part of my personality that's actually going to take control of things.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to be the victim anymore. I'm going to do this.
Hmm.
And like I say, that can be helpful because it can you move. There's a reason at every single point along the journey that we created every single aspect of our personality. Every
Hmm.
single one was trying to help us, and did at some point, otherwise we wouldn't have done it.
Hmm.
The question is, like, is it still working? Do you want to still do that? Do you want to stop creating more construct that ultimately can help for a little bit, but then just creates more problems down the line?
Yeah.
Or, and what I would say is the essence of the True Leadership Foundations program is really just getting the foundation and learning how to do the deep inner work. We're always going to have stuff coming up. I've got stuff coming up all the time. I experience increasing clarity, confidence, and presence. I have stuff coming up all the time, though, that I'm working to consistently clear and becoming aware of different parts of my personality that are, running the show.
Hmm.
And so, that's really the essence of the True Leadership Foundation's work. I like to say is, to identify what is the heart of the matter, the one place where it would make the biggest difference to transform in your life. And to transform there, certainly, but that's not really the purpose of the work. The purpose of the work is to help someone to show and to help someone learn really the very, very fundamentals of how to do the inner work so that
Hmm.
one can continue doing that
Hmm.
in perpetuity,
Yeah.
to continue learning and growing from our experiences well after, they've hopefully, worked and learned from me or whatever has happened. So
Yeah.
that would
I
be
love it.
my prayer for it.
You talk about stories, and one of the great questions that one of my coaches asks me whenever he calls me out on some bullshit is he'll say, "Is that story serving you?"
Mhm.
I love that, right? Because that's the ultimate question. Like we've all got stories, whether they're great ones or bad ones. The question is it something that's serving you, and is it something that's serving your higher purpose? Is it leveling you up, or is it keeping you down?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I would say, first of all, before you can even ask that question, you have to see that it's a story.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And that's
Yeah.
that's the tricky part is like, we believe our stories so we are so merged with our personality, we think it's what we are.
Yep.
Right?
100%.
That's the prison, that's the trick of it. And so that's why, the True Leadership Foundations program is all about, really, it's slows everything way, 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 way down and says, hold on, let's get really clear on what awareness actually is. I'm not talking about awareness through a filter. And I often say, like, the power of awareness is to look at what we've been looking through, right? And so, understanding or even having the awareness that we're looking through something, that there is a story there, is so important, right? Because you could be totally willing and open to asking yourself that question. But if you don't know or don't have awareness that you're running a story around it, which is true for all of us in lots of different ways, you'll never ask it.
Yeah, I like it. Um, let's talk tactics, Ty. How do you get people to a point where they are able to differentiate, where they're able to recognize a story?
Yeah, it's a great question. So within the program, so one of the things that I have found in working with people, and this is true in groups and individually, right, is that things have to be really, really relevant. That's why I feel like mindfulness in general or meditation in general, first of all, is super helpful, but can sometimes like miss an opportunity to make something really, really relevant in a person's life. So we start by identifying what I call the heart of the matter, right? And the heart of the matter, someone, you start by doing a real, in-depth intake by looking at essentially all of the things that, well, your vision for your life, right? And then all of the, the sort of struggles or challenges that get in the way with that. And the heart of the matter is really like an inner leverage point. It's finding something when you take a step back, and I help folks get to this because it's important to really, really identify this. But to get to the heart of the matter is that one thing, if you imagine as like a string with beads, right? If you really get to the heart of the matter, you'll pull that string and all the other beads will sort of line up.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right. So it's really at the core. Whereas if you get something that's not the heart of the matter, you pull it and everything's still sort of out of alignment, right? So you really want to work with what's the source, because there's a trillion things that you could be paying attention or decide to, you know, um, be aware of. So what is the most important thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that's going to give you the biggest change for the least amount of effort is what a leverage point is. So you start with that. And then you begin to work yourself backwards. So begin by identifying what I call counter tactics, right? Counter
Mm-hmm.
tactics really are, this word is important for a couple of reasons. One, it's working counter to your heart of the matter. So if your heart of the matter, you could identify, let's say your heart of the matter is something like simply like, well, let me just say, when you get to the heart of the matter, it can sort of present itself. You can say there's a theme, something along the lines of like, things in general are not okay, right? There's the one theme that's running through this is like, something's not okay. So, expressed in a positive way, you might say everything's okay. That could be the heart of the matter, right? Or I am able to express myself confidently, something along those lines, right? So you take that heart of the matter and then you identify what I call counter tactics, behaviors, thoughts, and feelings which are counter to
Mm-hmm.
that heart of the matter, right? Really listing them out. In this process, you're learning some. There's pieces all along the way here, making this subject to object shift. It's what I was talking about before. It's being able to look at what you've been looking through. Because the reality is that any time that one of those counter tactic behaviors, thoughts, or feelings comes up, it is a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
It is your signal letting you know that your egoic construct is here. So you begin catching it. You begin tracking it very intentionally, right? So that's really the beginning of a much longer journey, right?
Sure.
So it's just like the first thing is just seeing it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I see it, now what? Right? And then there's the program essentially is a step-by-step where you're learning how to do different tracking exercises, which is sort of reflecting into the past in order to strengthen your awareness in the present. Certainly meditation exercises, which are like, I like to say, practice when it's easy so that it's easier when it's hard, right? Alchemy practices, which is actually how learning on these cumulative practices, how to actually stay with an experience that we're having when our reactivity, ultimately the egoic construct, wants us to vacate the premises. So essentially about how to stay and actually have the experience that we're having so that we grow from it. And then, what I call relating, which is a process of deep inner inquiry in order to gather deeper understanding about, where these pieces have come from, not necessarily why they're there, that's less important, but how they're trying to help so that we can actually cultivate compassion. In a way, everything is about just learning how to stay with what is happening without leaving. In my experience, the people that I've worked with, the leaders that I've worked with, it's the most effective leadership development that I've ever found. And once you do that, boy, helping someone, for example, have that difficult conversation is easy.
Yeah.
Because they've actually grown their capacity to have a difficult conversation. It's not about them having a tool to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
There's deeper presence, ease with themselves and within difficulty that allows them to engage in the world in a completely new way in every aspect of their life.
Nice. Ty, who are your clients? Who do you typically work with? I know you are an executive team and leadership coach, but who are your clients specifically?
Yeah, great. So, I'm really looking at three particular sectors. One is certainly more and more interested in climate. Right. So I have one of my clients has been Sustainable Ocean Alliance, working with leaders there and the incredible work that they've been doing. They actually they're like an accelerator for Sustainable Ocean Alliance is also an accelerator for other ocean entrepreneurial projects and businesses, right? And so are an accelerator for incredible projects. And I just recommend that everybody sort of look them up in the work that they're doing. And you've heard me say before, leverage points, right? Climate, to me, like the inner work of consciousness, is a leverage point. Leadership is a leverage point in organizations, and climate is a leverage point in the world right now. And so I'm super interested in working, more there. I also have had healthcare clients, currently working with Stanford Emergency Medicine, for example, and I've worked with companies like Health Grades, sort of more on the technology side, to organizations like Good Eggs, and sort of more in the technology side as well. So I would say those three sectors: technology, healthcare, and climate is something that, a new place that I'm sort of looking at potentially heading. So
I love it, man. What about like typical size of the company? How many employees?
yeah, great. I'm finding that most of my work is settling in organizations that have 1,000 people or less, right? That's really, especially the kind of work that I do with organizations and teams. Once it starts to get outside of that, I've just found that it's harder to actually have that deeper, long-term, ongoing, sustained work with an organization. So yeah, that's something that I find is really beneficial. Okay, we primarily talked about, individual coaching and the True Leadership Foundations program, but the other aspect of my work, actually I've been doing it longer than I've been doing individual coaching, is the team and organizational aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And so really being able to get in there and engage with an organization, I would say, especially when they grow past that stage where, they might not have a learning, they might not have an L&D department yet, right? They might not be holding sort of all of the things in house that a larger organization might have, and are looking for more of a partner, right, in terms of really focusing on culture, really focusing on relationships, helping teams, right, to have better conversations. I think that accountability is another real leverage point in organizations.
Nice.
So really have very specific offerings around that, how to leverage accountability for, really transforming culture within an organization, and just really fundamentally pinpointing that has been amazingly transformative. So,
Right. Where do you get your clients right now? How do you market your services?
well, this is the thing I would say is you heard me saying earlier, do you have a coach? And what I'd say is, my learning edge right now is taking my business from word of mouth into a place where, I'm learning right now. I'm learning how to substantiate my business online on LinkedIn. It's a whole new language, one that I will say I'm super interested in and have been having, a lot of fun with, in terms of writing and like the sort of psychology, right,
Mm-hmm.
of, the one thing I'll say is like the difference between, if you and I are in a coaching conversation and I say something and it just lands with like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
Uh-huh.
That can sound like crickets on LinkedIn, where you're not having the context, right? And so learning that, I'm like, oh, of course, people are having to spend their own mental calories in order to make sense of what I'm even saying. And so I'm really having to learn and wanting to learn right now how to talk about things in this new arena in a way that really makes sense. I'm super interested in doing more podcasts. This is one of, I think it's only like the third one that I've done.
Nice.
So that's a really exciting way to get out and sort of talk about things. And I'd say, other than obviously still continuing word of mouth and creating long-term ongoing relationships with the clients, that I already have, it's about being active on LinkedIn and learning that whole game of marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. It is its own language for sure.
Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah. You should do more podcasts. Podcasts are a great way to get the word out. And it's really good. It's just really good practice for any coach, not you specifically, right? But
Yeah, please.
capital
Yeah.
Y, proverbial you, to talk about what you do and how you do it, and just gain more mental clarity for yourself about it,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
you're in the hot seat. You got to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I can, that's one thing that's been interesting for me here in this conversation, because I realized while I was talking to you that most of the time that I'm talking about the True Leadership Foundations course, right, and the True Leadership approach, I'm talking about it in context with someone that has something that they're working with in their mind, and I'm talking about it less as a sort of abstract idea.
Mhm.
And so that was a little bit of a like, oh, this is a new way that I'm learning how to talk about this. So I've appreciated that opportunity to have that conversation here today.
Awesome. Awesome. Ty, I wasn't even keeping track of the time. We are like right at the hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. Why don't you quickly, if you have a couple more minutes,
Hmm.
would you share with us some big wins that you've had with your coaches? Sorry, with your coaching.
Yeah, well, I'm super I'm super excited because this True Leadership Foundations mastermind that I have started, which essentially I'm enrolling people in now, and I've got my first 8 folks engaged in this, what I would say is a community of practice, right? So I have been individually coaching people through this framework that I have been developing over the past 5 years, now turned it into, an offering in which more than one person can do it. And so, like, even just yesterday, getting off of a call, I think we're only, really 2-3 months into the process. And boy, the benefit of collective learning is just immense.
Yeah.
So I really, really love that aspect. It's more along these lines of people learning from each other, right? So there's obviously the foundation of the work that we're learning, but the learning that's coming through and the breakthroughs that people see, I'll tell you, and it's even just yesterday, two people really just, and this is just at the beginning of the work,
Mm-hmm.
really beginning to see that they are not their thoughts in a way that has so much transformative potential, in a way that they begin to actually inhabit their body
Mm-hmm.
in a way that you can just see it. I mean, and they express it in their eyes as like this absolutely fundamental transformation.
Right.
So that's just really what happened yesterday. I'm thinking
Yeah.
of, for folks that have worked with me longer over time, the transformations that I see from this work are they're absolutely incredible. It's truly more, it's deeper happiness and confidence. There's all of this sort of external benefits of that, and I would say in leadership positions, it's people recognizing that they're able to handle more complexity and deeper challenges without sort of getting swayed or feeling overwhelmed, right? So that's a really pragmatic way that it shows up in the world. Other leaders that I have worked with over time, really seeing that has turned into very significant increases in responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
right? And promotions in the way of, taking on more complexity and the ability to manage and lead more people in really significant ways. But I'll tell you, the things that really stick out for me are ineffable in a way. There's those sort of external things, but really it's someone getting the sense that they have the fundamental tools now, that when challenge arises, not if, but when the hard stuff arises, that they have a basic framework, right?
Yeah.
That they don't feel overwhelmed, even if what they're experiencing is overwhelming, that they don't feel overwhelmed in addition by saying, what the heck am I going to do about this? That
Mm-hmm.
there's a wisdom and a security and a comfort and a peace that comes from having a really solid foundation on, knowing how to learn and grow from the experiences that we have, and continuously doing so over life.
I love that, Ty. I think that's such important work for humankind. If you can't, I've been giving this a lot of thought in my own kind of journey and journaling lately. If you can't succeed at whatever it is you're doing, if you can't succeed at that, if you can't excel during the hard times, you already know that it's not going to last the long term, because hard times are going to come around again. If you can only, so if you have to wait until things are easy, you know that it's not sustainable. So you have to be able, you have to be able to survive those hard times and thrive during those hard times, because they're not going to stop. Right?
I mean, I so love that, and I feel like there's immense wisdom that is also like really, really freeing.
Yeah.
When, and it's, part of it, I think, is just a realization of this shift from, how do I, turn the world into my own image of what I think I need it to be in order for me to feel better, right? To how do I engage with the world as it is in a way in which my happiness is not dependent on whether or not I have a partner,
Right.
that my confidence is not dependent on whether or not I'm employed, that I'm actually so well seated in myself and in the essence of what I am, that I can have hardships and experience the inevitable ups and downs and, challenges that we will all have and will never cease having as long as we have a body on this planet, and still be connected, right? To that innate goodness, to that innate value and worth and beauty and okayness.
That's great. I love it, man. That's fantastic. I really do. I appreciate that sentiment. Like I said, I think that's super, super, super important work. So good on you.
Thank you,
Ty,
friend. You too.
where can people go to learn more about the True Leadership Mastermind?
Great. Yeah. Thank you. So 2 places right now. One place is just going to be to find me, Ty Hammond, on LinkedIn and reach out to me there. And another place is at my website, onemountainleadership.com. And there's a tab for Mastermind there.
Beauty. Ty, is there anywhere else online, social media where people can connect with you and follow you online, or is LinkedIn kind of the hotspot, the website?
Like I said, man, I'm just starting here, so I'm trying to start pretty simple. I'm starting with one with one social media outlet. That seems like a big enough lift for me as it is right now. So that's the primary place. At some point I plan on being on Instagram and all those different places, but little by little, step by step here.
I love it, man. I love it. We'll talk more about LinkedIn offline because I think that's a good spot for you.
Great.
Awesome, Ty. Anything else that you would like to talk about that we didn't have a chance to hit upon before we wrap up?
I just want to reflect back to you that I really enjoyed this conversation, and even as you asked me that question, I felt like the questions that you asked really helped. I feel like led me on a journey where I was able to talk about this in a way in which I actually feel pretty complete. There's so much more that I could talk about here, but I don't feel like I'm leaving any sort of too crazy open threads, and I just want to kick back that appreciation towards you. And this conversation. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ty Hammond, for taking the time to be here with us today on the Remarkable Coach podcast. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's been my pleasure to be here.
And thank you to our listeners and viewers. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers.